Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show, which is presented to you by Power Planter Earth Augers, the official digging tool. To find the right size for your digging project, visit powerplanter.com. Now here are your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Welcome back to the program. Welcome back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show. Thank you so much for hanging around. We've got a bunch of your questions that we are going to answer. If you've got a question, you can certainly send it to us via email at gardentalkradio@gmail.com. You can also drop us a phone call. You can jam your fingers in the phone and call us at 1-800-927-SHOW. That's 1-800-927-SHOW. And we can get your question answered. If you can't get through, certainly leave a message and we will call you back.
All right. So this is the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show. Did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I'm a first-time gardener, and I'd like to know how long or how big my seedlings need to be before I plant them in the actual ground.
Well, that's a good question. A lot of people fear that they are going to put their seedlings out too soon, and a couple of things you want to be aware of is, one, it's a common question. So a general rule of thumb is when a seedling has about 3 or 4 sets of true leaves, it's large enough to go outside in the garden after the hardening off process. Now, when I say 3 or 4 sets of true leaves, that's the canopy beginning to develop. Not the very first set of leaves are going to be the seedling leaves, and then as you see 2 sets of leaves right and left, and then front and back and right to left, then that plant is going to be adequate to go outside and begin to grow. And let's talk about the hardening off process real quick. So once you've got a seedling that is established at the correct amount of true leaves, then we want to transition it outside. But going through a hardiness program or system, we can't just take it from the grow room, plant in the garden, and everything's wonderful, because that's not going to work.
Right. So you want to, about a week before you're going to plant your seeds, every day you want to put them outside for about an hour and increase that time, so for about a week before. So the first day an hour, second day a couple hours, third day 3 hours, and so on up until a week before. And then you want to leave them outside the night before you're going to put them, overnight before you're going to put them in the ground, and this acclimates them to the outside climate.
Does that help?
Okay.
Yep.
Now, does this apply both to vegetables and herbs?
Yes, it does apply to vegetables and herbs. Depending on the type of vegetable, if it's tomatoes or peppers or eggplants or the warmer weather crops, we want to make sure we plant them outside during the appropriate time when the soil temperature is 55 degrees at root zone. The herbs are going to need a much warmer soil temperature, the 60 to 65 range, as those are very warm weather crops. But the transitioning them outside through the hardening them off is the same for herbs and vegetables for both, yes, and the same amount of leaves are needed to get those outside at the appropriate time. And with that question, we would also advise, if you can direct sow the plants outside without having them start indoors, then you don't have to worry about the transitioning period. You can allow nature to take care of them themselves, but we do start a lot of indoors, and that's a very good question and a good follow-up to that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You've been a lot of help.
Well, thank you for giving us a call, and we appreciate that, and you're always welcome to get a hold of us anytime. And we will go to another question here. You can call in just like that last caller did at 1-800-927-SHOW, 1-800-927-SHOW, anytime, day or night. Holly, what's the next question on our list that we have gotten in for the show here?
You're going to have to tell me.
Here. Question is, I've got ash from my fireplace. Is it good to put in my raised beds or in the ground? Is this correct? Have I understood this procedure correctly? And you can add wood ash to your soil. in small amounts. It does sweeten the soil, raises that pH level, and it can add to, depending on what you want to grow. If you raise the pH level too much or too alkaline, the soil, which is harms the plants. It doesn't like when there's too much alkaline in the soil. You want a pH about 7, 6, 8, 7, 2, somewhere in that range, depending on what you're growing. The more acidity, acid-loving plants, like blueberries, want about a 4.5 to 5, kind of 4.5, 5, somewhere in that range. But you can sprinkle it across your garden. It doesn't hurt it at all, but you want to do it sparingly and not to add too much because it can cause growth problems on your vegetables.
So Jane asked, how do you keep squirrels from eating all the bird seeds from the feeders?
Couple of things that you can do here. One, if you've got a thin metal pole that they are climbing up or transitioning up, what you could do is remove that pole and attach a slinky to the bottom of the bird feeder, so when they crawl up, they get a hold of that slinky and they can't climb and they're just bouncing up and down.
Some people spray it with cooking oil.
Cooking oil, lubricant of a variety of different organic and inorganic consistencies. The other thing you can do is you can buy birdseed that has heat or chili powder infused into it, the very hot chili powder, because the birds cannot taste that heat. However, squirrels do have those sensory mechanisms in their nostrils and mouth in which they will eat that and essentially burn their mouths, and they will find elsewhere to consume birdseed, preferably your neighbors. But you can get rid of them from eating your birdseed that way.
All right. So here's another one. They want to know, can I use pressure treated lumber for raised beds and building raised beds this year? Just trying to find the best lumber to use. Can I use pressure treated?
Well, pressure treated, we encourage you to follow us on our website, the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com, where we will be transitioning our in-ground garden to raised beds. However, we are going to look for pressure treated lumber because it doesn't contain the arsenic as it did back in the 90s. This is copper treated. There's a copper material that is treated with this lumber. And copper, there is some microscopic amounts of copper that's in soil. And people are concerned about the leaching into the soil. Well, there's not that much to be concerned with the new pressure treated lumber nowadays. And pine, I'm just pulling arbitrary numbers here because I don't know the exact scientific rot procedure on pine, but let's say a pine raised bed will last 3 years. Pressure treated, you may pay a little bit more for the lumber, but you're going to maybe 75% to 100% longer. Maybe you'll get 5-6 years out of that raised bed with that pressure treated lumber, and it's well worth the investment. And we will certainly, when we construct our raised beds, we are going to use pressure treated lumber because there is not that concern of the toxicity in which it once had in it in the 90s, that arsenic. So, yeah, go ahead and use the pressure-treated lumber. Works very well. We encourage you to do such. And if you can, and money is not an option, Western red cedar is the best because it's rot-proof, and that's the best scenario, but we all don't have necessarily that option or the availability to that particular type of lumber. Here's a question, Holly. This is for you, Holly. For those of you who are not aware, Holly is a multi-award winning Wisconsin State Fair canner. Question here. I had 2 pints of jam. I had 2 pints jars, not seal, when I made made jam yesterday. I had heard you can reprocess it and try again. Today
Okay, yeah. So for jam, that might be a little bit tricky because jam does need that heat and then the process to set up. So I think it would be okay with jam. But if you're canning, like, say, salsa or chutney or pickles, whatever, then you can reprocess it. You can try out the jam. It should be okay. But what you want to do is you want to start with everything at room temperature, and that would be the water, the jars. Put a new lid on the jar, and then once you have, then you put it into the canner, get the water boiling, and then once it's at that full boil, then you would start your timer.
Well, for people who are not really that into canning or new to canning, what is one of the main reasons why a jar may not seal properly during the canning procedure? Is there this is always reason why?
Sometimes it's because maybe the top of your jar has had some moisture on it from when you were filling it. It could be because we always check our jars. We check the rims to make sure, like with just our finger, to make sure there's no like little teeny dents or cracks or something in it. So that could be why. Sometimes it's just how it works out.
And when we talk, what is the lids that you recommend? I know there is a quote-unquote reusable type of lid versus the metal lid that many of us are familiar with.
I just use the regular metal lids. People like the reusable lids. They have a lot of success with them, but that's something that I've never decided to try.
Now, it's not necessarily, it's a gasket that you have to replace, right? Okay.
Yeah, so there's a part you still have to replace, but as far as part of it, you don't. So it's really up to you. I guess I just don't have the patience to try to figure those out. Monkey around with them.
Okay. Nathan has a question. He is in Green Bay, and he wants to know, I have failed miserably at gardening for the past few years. Well, we are sorry to hear that, Nathan. So last year, I did nothing but work on getting better soil. Okay, that's a good step. This year, my goal is to start earlier with better seedlings and seeds. All right. My question is, can I put my seeds from seedlings out in my greenhouse right away, or must I keep them indoors? I live in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I'm thinking of starting tomatoes the second week of April. Thank you.
Well, you can start them.
But in Green Bay, that would be about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all based, as we talked about in the second segment, your growing zone. With the greenhouse, the transition period, if you're taking it from inside your ambient 70-degree home and you're taking it outside into the greenhouse, it depends if your greenhouse is a heated, climatized greenhouse, and many greenhouses of small stature are not. So it would be questionable to do such if the conditions of long range is not sustainable to above freezing. You want to be aware of that. You may want to keep them in longer inside in the house, and then do the hardening off procedure, and then you can allow them to hang out in the greenhouse until it is actually safe and frost free to put them in the ground at the appropriate time in the Green Bay area. Now, here in Zone 5A in southeast Wisconsin, we plant ours the Memorial Day weekend, most instances. Sometimes we get them planted a little earlier. But I would be very cautious of just putting them out in your greenhouse if it is not climatized due to that hard cold that they can experience. Tomatoes are a very tender plant and do not do well when the temperatures drop below 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.